Okay, and now we're going to work on exercise 4. I'm going to create new file, name it exercise4.js. Basically, what we want to do here is we are going to create a functional component called data fetcher. And data fetcher is going and getting the data from this URL that I mentioned here. It's just the free data. If you want to try, you can try as well. And then we're going to try to find a way to display the data that we're getting from here um, on the screen in React. Okay, so let's just take a look at this URL and see what we are dealing with. This is the data that I am dealing with. This is the data at this URL. What I want to do is I want to be able to display the name of this first person on the screen. This is Michael. Now let's see how we can do that. Okay, for that, I'm just going to start with the basic. I'm going to create a function here, and I'm going to call it data fetcher. So after that, I'm going to have a return statement here. And inside of my return, call it user. Okay. And the only thing that I want to get from user for now is I'm going to do an H5 and I'm going to say I want the name. And then again, because all of them have to be in one div, I gotta have to have a div around this. And that means a one parent element. So I'm gonna put a div around this. So this is what I have. And then I want to show this on my screen here. In order to do that, I will export defaults because I only want this function. And I'm going to say I want to export data fetcher. So save here, and then I'm coming here. Now I have to import it in my app.js. It's going to be data fetcher, and I want it to come from exercise 4. And then inside of this div, I have commented out all of the previous exercises that we did. And then inside of this div, I'm just going to call data fetcher. Now let's take a look. Okay, I have user and I have name here. So maybe I should make it just a little bit bigger. So I'm going to make this H2 and this one H4. Um, and here I'm just going to put a H1 saying that this is exercise 4. So right now, what I want to do, is I want to be able to get this name, Leanne Graham, from this JSON file, and I want to be able to display it here under the name. Okay, so the way that I do that, first of all, I have to get this data in my I mean, for this one, you can get multiple names from it, but for now, because I just want to show you useEffect, I don't need to do that for now. I'm just gonna get the first name. Okay, so yeah, I want to display that name here. Now, for that, I first have to um fetch the data. In order to fetch the data, let's just try to see how it's going to look. I'm gonna call a constant here, and I'm gonna name it data. And then for that, I'm going to fetch, and I'm gonna send this address. So I say, I want you to go to this address and fetch the data for me. And then I want to alert it. Um, and the alert is going to be whatever the data is. I want to see what I'm going to get if I try to fetch something from that address. So it says object promise. Okay, goes away. Object promise. Notice that it goes away. It says object promise. What does this mean? What's going to happen here is that when you are assigning something like this, it's going to be an immediate assignment, okay? And fetch, what it sends back immediately is just a promise. It's going to say, okay, I would do that for you, but it doesn't do it immediately. The reason it doesn't do it immediately is because it can't do it immediately. It has to go grab it. It can't be immediate. For example, if you're ordering food online, as soon as you as soon as you pay, it doesn't mean that your food is going to be in front of your door, but it will give you a promise that your food will be delivered. It's the same thing here. It won't be able to immediately capture the data and give it to my constant data. What it's going to give me, it's going to give me a promise. And so the immediate thing that I get from fetch is a promise, and it's basically useless. I don't need it. Okay. It's just trying to tell me that it will do it. So what I have to do, because I don't want to assign promise object data, I'm going to wait until fetch is able to complete what it wants to do. I'm going to use await here. And when I use await, it's going to give me an error. And it says these expressions are only allowed within async function. Okay, so we're going to make this function async. Okay, so now based on what it is, I'm waiting for it to do its job. And then after that, it's going to assign the data, and I'm going to get an alert of data. And let's see what happens. I save this. Okay, I have received an object response. So that's a good step. Right now, we're not getting promise anymore. We're getting response. But now look what happens. I say, okay, okay, okay. You see, I keep doing this. I keep re-rendering. And the reason it's happening, actually, let's wait for a few minutes and see what happens. Here, this is what I wanted to show you. So I waited long enough and this happened. It says an unknown component is an async client component. Only server components can be async at the moment. But what's important here is that we cannot use async at the moment. Okay, so using async is not possible in React. It will cause problem. And one of the problem, as you saw, it was multiple re-rendering. So this is not an option here. And what can we do now? Since we cannot create async, and the reason for that is React is not looking for a promise, is actually looking for an actual JSX to be able to display it right away. So we cannot use async function. That is not a solution here. So right now we have this problem that we need to wait for this URL to be able to respond. I have to make an async call. So I wait for this one to respond. The problem is that React cannot handle that. So there is one option that we have here, and that is using useEffect. UseEffect will help us to use an async function without disturbing our React function. So now I hope you understand that why we gotta have to use useEffect. I'm going to import useEffect from React. Okay, so now I'm going to create a useEffect hook here. UseEffect wants two things from me. One is a function and the other one is an array. I'm going to create the function here, and then the other one is an array. So that is what useEffect is. Inside of my function, I want to create another function. And that function is going to, I'm going to make it an expression. So that's going to be const fetch data. Inside of my function, I created another function, and that is fetch data. And this is going to be an asynchronous function. So this variable, this constant fetch data is equal to an asynchronous function, and that function is going to do what we were trying to do here. Okay, now I'm using it inside of useEffect, and I'm able to do an async. So I can make this call to wait for a response. And I'm going to take this alert out as well. And I'm going to put that inside of here as well. So I'm going to go on the next line. Just going to clean up my code a little bit. Okay, so we did this so far. So I have this function that I have created inside of my useEffect. So right now I just defined the function. I haven't run it. Okay. So if I save this and if I go here, nothing's gonna happen, because even if I run, nothing's gonna happen because I just defined the function inside of my useEffect and I never called it. So it's never going to execute. In order for it to execute, I need to call fetch data. Again, I'm gonna call it inside of my useEffect because it is an asynchronous function. So save. And now if I run it here, I gotta have to be able to get an alert. Okay, so now it's pretty good. We are getting object response, so we're not getting promise anymore. We're getting object response. So my alert is actually, and we're not having any trouble. See, if I say okay at least 2 times, it's going to show up. Okay, so we're not in a constant loop. We're able to get out of it, and it shows everything. So that means that side effect currently fixed the problem of async. Okay, so now I have this information inside of data. Everything works fine because I am able to get it. Now, um, I want to be able to access this first person because right now I'm getting the whole object and I don't want the whole object. I want this first person. So one of the things that I can do is I can parse this into a JSON file. So I'm going to say const JSON is equal to data.json. Okay, so I'm going to parse this into data.json. Another thing to keep in mind is that again, parsing into JSON is another asynchronous, parsing into JSON is asynchronous as well. So if you don't use await, again, it will return a promise. So instead of just trying again and see that it is returning a promise, I'm just gonna use the wait right now. Okay, so right now, if I want to use alert.json, I save it here, and I kind of have to access it actually in order to be able to. I said I want this person, Leanne Graham, and for that, I'm going to go to the first element of this JSON, and I am going to say I want what? I want the name of it. I want the name of this person. Okay, so now if everything works properly, I have to be able to alert that name. I have to be able to get Leanne Graham here. So if I rerun this, here, I get the name Leanne Graham. So that means everything is working properly for now. So now let's see what happens here. If I go here, so I was able to get JSON0.name equals to alert. So now I'm going to create a variable here and I'm going to name it just name. Okay. And then I'm going to say empty for now. Okay. And then here I'm going to say name is equal to JSON 0.name. Okay, so I have this variable outside of my side effect, so it will be, so here I can access it as well. And then here I change the value of it to JSON0.name. So name right now have to be equal to Leanne's name. Now, just to double check and make sure that the value of name is actually changed, I'm going to use that inside of my alert. So if my alert comes as Leanne, that means that my name has changed. Okay, so it is changed. So right now I should be able to just put this equal to name and I should be able to get that name here, right? So the initial value of name is empty. Here I changed the value of it. I can actually alert it 2 times. Oh, never mind. Here I assign Leanne's name here, and then I will alert it to make sure that the value of name has changed. And then I use the same thing here to display it in H4. Okay, so now I save this. When I go here, I try to run this again. I will get Leanne's name here, but this still shows empty. And if you remember from the previous exercises, we said that the reason for that is that after useEffect runs and the name's getting updated, but we do not do re-render. So React doesn't know what had changed. Since there's no re-render, this is not going to get updated. In order for us to be able to capture the changes after something changes inside of our function and be able to display that, we have to be able to re-render. And for that, we need to be able to capture the value that was before. We need to have the memory of what had happened before the re-render. In order to do that, we're going to use useState. We talked about this in the previous exercises. If you want in-depth understanding of what useState is, you can go and look at the other exercise. But now I'm using useState, and then useState is giving me two things. useState passes an array, and the first element in this array is whatever object that you are trying to keep track of. And then the second element of this array is, I'm gonna name it name update, is um is a function, and this function, it's going to update whatever the name is. So right now I don't need this anymore. And I'm going to make this equal to useState because it is I'm trying to create a useState. And now I can give the initial value of the name. I'm going to give the initial value to empty so we can track if it actually changed or not. So now if I want to update the name, I cannot use this type of assignment anymore because name is part of useState. In order to update the name, I gotta use this function. So I'm gonna put name update here, and that is going inside of this. And so now I'm updating this name using this name update function. So what happens here is that we already have rendered this part of our code. So the JSX is already rendered. And then after that, useEffect is able to give us the data because useEffect is async and it's waiting for the response from this URL. And then it's waiting for this JSON file to be parsed. And so it's going to happen after this thing already rendered. But since we are using useState, we're able to track the changes that happened in our data. So whenever useEffect updates the value of the name, the whole thing will re-render. So right now, we should be able to get the actual name here and not empty anymore. And I don't need the alert here anymore. So I save this and then I go here and you see that the name has been updated to Leanne Graham. So yeah, that's basically what it is. And another thing that we're going to talk about later is that we have an array here inside of useEffect. What this array does, so if this array is empty, useEffect is going to run only once. So whenever I get the data from this URL, it is done. It's not going to do anything else anymore. But if you want to track something, like for example here, if you want to track the user ID and say whenever this ID changed, like for example, whenever this ID instead of 1 become 2, then this useEffect is going to run again. So you can put the user ID, you can mention the user ID inside of here. Right now, we're not able to do that because I am not able to make changes. This is just the static URL that I'm getting data from. So this ID never changes. It's always going to be 1. So it doesn't matter if I mention anything inside of my array or not. Nothing is going to change, and useEffect is not going to trigger and rerun again. But yeah, if you want your useEffect to run multiple times and track one of the elements, and whenever that element changed to rerun, then you can use this array. Probably I'm going to use it in the future projects, more complicated projects that we're going to make. But at this level, we just understood what useEffect and useState is and why we need to use it in our React project.